Hi, everyone. Basically, today you're listening to Data Reality Check, where data meets the real world, where we break down the lessons learned in data and tech. No hype, no fluff, just the stuff that really matters. And today I'm super excited to have in episode number 1 my dear friend Nicolas Averseng with me today. He's the founder and CEO of Joy, and he's a leading voice in the world of data products. Basically, I really like talking to him all the time because he's got the perfect mix between the tech know-how and product thinking. And I can't wait to really dig in. So welcome, Nicholas.
Thank you, Amy. I'm really happy to be here with you and of course to talk about data products and those challenges, which are it's a very active conversation right now. So it's a nice topic.
Thank you. Well, we have been talking about data products quite a bit now. You and me, we have done a couple of workshops about it, but people I feel are still very confused. And actually, now I'm having soon a new course in O'Reilly about that as well, and a book that is coming because of all this confusion. I want to tackle it with you in a very pragmatic way, very business driven, not all the tech stuff, right, that you can see everywhere and gets these all the planes talking and all that makes the confusion, the business people in general, quite lost. So let's just start with the basics. How do you define a data product, and why do you think this concept is gaining so much traction right now?
Yes, it's a good starter. I always like to start with those definition because everyone has his own definition of what is a data product. For me, I usually like to simplify that with two main things. It's a product because we apply product management methodology, and that means starting with business needs, starting with solving a concrete set of business needs and for identified stakeholders. And I think that's probably the most important part first is to say we call that a product because similarly to any product, we need to have a clear understanding of why we do it and how it's going to be consumed, etc., etc. And so I think the foundational part of doing a data product is to apply that kind of value-led thinking. And the second dimension is also the what I call the life cycle part, which is it's a product because it's not a one-time thing. It's not something we build once and we deliver. It's something that has a life cycle in terms of you do discovery, you design it, you build it, you deploy it, etc. But then it doesn't stop. You need to continue to monitor usage, to monitor quality, to monitor risk, etc., to monitor value, and to evolve that to make it a living thing. And that's key to make products that are going to be effectively adopted in a way. So that's those two dimensions for me are the most critical defining aspects of what is a data product, basically.
Yeah, you're totally right. I also feel that it should be, but it's not the case, very easy to transform what we know as a product thinking to data product thinking, right? Because this concept has been there for ages, and in software engineering it's been done forever. And I feel that it's quite difficult, right, to do this transition to data. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I think what I've seen, I'm coming initially from the software world. So, and in the software world, we've been applying product thinking, agile methodologies, CI/CD, different stuff for a long time. And initially, many people coming from the data world are more, either data scientists or even people on the data engineering side or data warehouse side don't have that culture. So there is a lot of education to do in that field to also bring the right tools, the right practices, and so on. So I think it's you're right. It shouldn't be so difficult because it's more a mindset approach than something else. But in many ways, when people have a way of doing things, it's always hard to change. Even if it looks sometimes it looks obvious, but it's you need to look at the problem from a different angle. And so many things on the data side are built from a bottom-up angle. So shifting those things are quite difficult. And actually, even on the industry, if you look at, if you read on LinkedIn or in different articles, there's also many people confusing and continuing to educate on what I would qualify as being all wrong in some, saying, for example, there's a lot of messages saying you should care about data quality first before doing AI, which is true and doesn't make any sense, because what is data quality outside of a given purpose, for example? So if you apply product thinking, it would be first, I know what I want to achieve, and then quality is one of course, required artifact, but that you can define more clearly in front of a clear business expectation.
I totally agree because I also come from the software engineering world, and it's for me, and I feel like most of the first liners in data engineering also come from the software engineering work, so they kind of understand, but then they got used to work more in these kind of ad hoc requests, like I need a dashboard, I need a pipeline with
Exactly.
no purpose, right? And then you are just delivering dashboards with no really usage or value or anything across the board, that this kind of mentality got into data for so many years now that maybe that's the reason why it's difficult.
Probably, yeah.
But if you go back to our days in software engineering, and these data engineers, not the new ones but the old ones, right? Think about it. I mean, we already work usually in agile, so we already have the sprints, we already have what we would like to do and how we want to do it. So it's just one more step, right? It's the data product manager or the product manager. You don't have to be an expert in SQL. You don't have to be an expert in Python or anything. It's just bringing also this organizational part of things, right? Mentality change and apply it to this product. But I think that's the hardest part. But also the product managers are quite scared about what does it really mean to be a data product owner or data product manager, because oh my god, I'm gonna own, I don't know, a pipeline or a dashboard. I don't even know how it works.
Yeah, maybe, but yeah, it's true. I think it can be scary, maybe feeling unnecessarily scaring, because as you just mentioned, if you're just asking the right questions, of course, you need to care about slightly different, I would say, technical and non-technical approach, but, specific problem coming from data. And we have the same stuff when we talk about AI products. AI products bring another set of concerns or of things to care about. So it's not to overlook those changes, but still you can come with many good practices and apply them. And if you work closely with the technical people, then you can get there basically.
Yeah, I agree on that. So Joy basically helps organizations to build data products, to generate business value. And that is something really like about the product you have, because it's more focused on the business value first instead of just jumping into, I mean, my dashboard, I need it. What was the original spark, or what was the need that you kind of inspire you to start with this project?
Yeah, so different things. One is that I've been working as a consultant, and so all those consulting organizations coming to companies, building nice data, nice strategies, delivering those huge PowerPoints and Excel sheets with use cases and so on. And then kind of either companies being unable to execute on that, or the fact that it's not connected to what's going to happen afterwards. There was always that huge gap that was existing between what do we define as a strategy and how we operate. And that has been always a bit confusing. And so that's one big thing. I really wanted to find a way to help operationalizing the strategy, making sure that it's not just something for the execs. It's a direction, and we need to make sure that all the technical people know why they do stuff, and what good means, what success means, and also what risk are really. So connecting those two things has been really the main driver. And the second one is that when you look at the value chain, you mentioned data engineers, machine learning engineers, etc., BI engineers, each of them have tools that pretend to be for collaboration between IT and business, basically. But if you look at it from the business angle, you have 10 different tools that you need to collaborate with other people. So you don't have that kind of the right level of visibility, the right level of oversight to really help you building that common shared understanding and so on. So that's the two main angles about, and of course, the behind all of that, it's about value. How do we make sure that we align people on value? Again, I've been working with data scientists in the time, and sometimes they lose track of why, and then, or with data engineers, you lose track of why, and then you can continue to improve stuff that are not required, or miss improvements of what is really required. So then it becomes a technical work, and not something that is really, it's a lot of waste, generating a lot of waste, basically. So that's my main goal, is to make sure that we have that kind of operating system, for the data team that really drive transformation, really drive adoption, and redrive the product thinking, basically. And that's one. And in a way, when I started UE, I didn't put the word product in there, but I realized after some time that it was implied. The product thinking is so much deeply rooted into everything we encourage. And of course, when the product management word started to raise, that was an obvious kind of message around what we do.
Yeah, yeah, I totally understand because you don't know the amount of clients I get like, hey, I need a data strategy or I need an AI strategy, but they want a PPT strategy, right? They are not really looking for something that is operational or don't understand how to make it
Yeah.
operational. And some of them even get a little bit skeptical because I tell them we need to start smaller, right? I mean,
Mm.
yeah, we can do a long-term vision, but this is going to change because AI is changing, data is changing, the ways of doing things are changing every day. So, yeah, maybe a little bit of high level, but focus on the value first.
Yeah.
What is bringing value? Like the long-hanging fruits. What is bringing you immediate, I don't know, revenue, or I don't know, improve your churn rate, or so on. So let's work on what brings you immediate value to you right now, because what is important today might not be tomorrow. So why would you do a strategy for 5 years, right?
Exactly. And also what is important is that because it's new, it's a change management process. When we talk about data literacy and adopting the data-driven mindset, etc., it's about putting the organization in motion. So also part of selecting the right use cases or the right products is also who is ready to adopt them. And so you have two angles. The value angle can be absolute value, how much value you can bring to the organization, but you also need to think in terms of readiness and maturity and see what does it take for business teams or target users, whoever they are, to adopt that and are they ready for it. And sometimes you need to be a bit tactical about that, and say, let's find ways where we can start to move the needle and build things that are going to be really adopted. And this is what is going to create the right, envy and dynamic within the organization to build. So it's kind of, I like looking at it, as you said, as a maturity path, saying we need to start small, deliver tangible results that will allow us to go further. And so again, it's about bringing that iterative mindset, feedback loop mindset, continuous improvement mindset, all those things. It's not just buzzwords, it's something that are really important to, sometimes people, when you talk about all of that, it seems that very ethereal, and ambitious. But for me, it's the contrary. It's very, very pragmatic. Actually, it's down to earth. It's saying, I'm not talking about boiling the ocean. It's about having the right way to prioritize stuff, finding things that are going to have short-term impact, learning from that, doing the next step, etc., etc. So it requires some discipline, but it's actually not theoretical. It's very pragmatic.
Exactly. And something that I like when I go to consultancy to some clients and I do this kind of data strategy, I'm not the one person, or at least I'm not the kind of consultant that is going to basically give them some nice slides, right? I want to have workshops with them. I want to understand what is the business goals. What do you have in your data team? How these even marry together? If we can already save and I don't know, deprecate some of those dashboards that have been there for years and no one is touching, and then create a plan, right? And they are the ones who need to say, okay, we want to prioritize A, B, or C, because a lot of companies, they will come and they will tell them, yeah, go with this use case. No, the idea is actually for them to find what is the right thing, right? And speak between the stakeholders, learn to create these relationships. And that's part of the product thinking, right? Like talk with each other, understand each other, and from there on, start building blocks little by little. But a lot of companies are still, I think, in the mindset of they want to see just these kind of, let's say, university papers with references from Gartner as a data strategy. But how do you put that into action, right? It's, as you said, very theoretical instead of pragmatic. It's also not gonna work very well.
Yeah, I think that what you just mentioned around collaboration with the business is very important because you see different pitfalls. Sometimes you see data and team that try to know better, saying, yeah, the business teams are not ready, so we're going to do something for them and then deliver. But then usually adoption doesn't really work. And yeah, so that's a really important stuff. I think and the second topic around that have been digging into recently is the notion of accountability. Because what happens today with that, very feature-oriented thing that you were mentioning before, people come, ask you new pipeline, new dashboards, and you deliver that, is that there is low accountability from the people who request things. They come and say, I want a new dashboard, I want a new pipeline, I want a new data set, and then they don't use it. And so for me, there's a whole question about, if you ask something, you should be accountable for actually using it in a way, and or giving feedback. So it's about, it's about finding the right balance. Sometimes it comes with who's paying for that, and how do you make the people who won't pay, and pay not only to build it, but also to operate it, and convey also that thing that whatever you build has a cost ongoing. So you need to build those things, because then this is what is going to bring an important part of the product thinking, is that maybe you should discard stuff that failed, or things that are not useful anymore, or things that are not useful because things change and it's not accurate anymore. And that's fine, so it's part also of, if you want to be innovative and experiment, it means that you need to account that some stuff will fail, basically. And that's not a bad thing, but you need to build that kind of accountability and discussion with the business to be able to support those discussions at some point. Should we reinvest? Can we reuse the product? Should we stop it? Is really important stuff, and again, very overlooked a lot of times.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. And that's why data governance, right, also needs to come in the game. And hopefully, in best case scenario, you will have domains which are going to be accountable for that dashboard, for that data, or if someone needs to consume, okay, maybe data contracts on top, technically speaking, right, to keep the quality. It could become very complex, but if you're in a small organization, because I get a lot of these questions like, okay, if I'm in a small organization, should I apply all that? And I'm like, not necessarily, but I start with the basics, right? Like, yeah, okay, this dashboard belongs to the sales department and this stakeholder is the one who requested. So business speaking is owned by this person, but technically speaking, belong to this data engineer who created, or this BI developer who created that. And then at least if you have a Notion or I don't know, Confluence, whatever you're using, and this is documented, that people have questions or they need maybe an extension of that data product, right? Because it could be just an extension or a merge between an existing one and this one, then you know who to contact, right? I remember one time, but that was a long time ago, that we didn't know who owned some data from some dashboard, and we started to look in the sources to see who was the owner, where did he even get this data from, from the back end. And it took literally, it sounds really, really, really dumb, but it took around 3 months to figure it out who created this, which was a person who was not even in the company anymore, and no one was taking care of it. And this still happens a lot. And that's why, as you mentioned, is very important accountability, right? Accountability needs to be there from day one. Otherwise, you lose the purpose at the end and you ended up with 10 dashboard that has been used once in the last 3 years. And metrics like, I don't know, NPS, for example, are really important to understand the feedback loop, as you also mentioned, to redesign, innovate, and keep alive those products. Or as you said, just deprecate them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. That question of losing sight is happens so often. Which you don't even know, and at the end, it's both costly, but I also think it's impacting trust. And a big thing, again, everyone is complaining about data literacy and so on, but one big thing in building literacy is also to build trust. Because as you mentioned, people are not acquainted with data. They fear that, they don't know what it is. So and so if you don't build trust, it's hard. So, and again, if you have that kind of discipline, you can build a better trust, because you can guarantee people saying, we don't have so much, but what we expose is trustable because we invest on that. And that's part of the big promise from products, from data products, is to have that trust aspect as part of what we deliver. And you mentioned data contracts. So I think data contracts is interesting because I know, from the very first question you asked, that some people would define a data product by data contracts in a way, saying if it has a contract. And for me, I look at data contracts as being one of the solutions, to your point. And it's like many other things. It's like if you want to scale, you need some kind of contract because this is what is going to define what data we expose. Is it changing? Do we have any whatever SLAs, business model? So it can be, and even the data contract specification can be very, very wide. So to your point, should you do all of it? Probably not for everyone or not for all products. But as always, I really like data contracts, and I think that's a must-have in many organizations. But we should not confuse the means and the end. A data contract is a mean to help defining some again contracts and kind of data API, but it's not the end. And sometimes if you just believe that because you define contract you have products, it's very misleading because then you miss the whole point about again, you miss the value part, you miss the adoption part, you miss the people part, you miss all that. So it's not just a packaged data set or a package. You need all the people and process things around. And of course, that was a discussion we had on LinkedIn some time ago. I don't remember with whom, but on the fact that technical best practices are implied by product management practices. And the reverse is not true. It's not because you apply the development best practices that you have good product management in place. But the other side is true. If you really want to apply the product management well, I really believe that by design, you need to have strong technical practices in place.
I totally agree on that. I never heard that people is calling data contracts data products. That's horrible already.
I heard that people saying, how do you define a data product? It's like any data set that has a data contract.
That's so wrong. And you see, that's why there is a lot of confusion everywhere, right? Because I love data contracts. I'm a fan. Actually, I started to implement it very early back in 2021 or something like that. But as enabler, right? As enabler of data quality, as enabler to document for technical or for the data catalog, the data product, because you can put all the metadata automated with a data catalog and surface it to the business people or other technical people, also as a way to create accountability, because sometimes teams are like little children from kindergarten and they don't want to take responsibility. So it was a way for us to people to like subscribe, let's say that way, and kind of follow it. There is a change. They cannot come for me tomorrow and tell me, hey, data team sucks, because we informed you that these changes are happening, right?
Yeah.
But I see it as an enabler, right? As a complement, but it's not the whole definition of a data product. It's just a technical thing that will bring quality, the definitions, metadata management, more, let's say, governance in place, but it's not the data product per se. I totally agree with you.
That's yeah. I have a story on that some years ago because people sometimes it was the same with APIs. People believe that because there is a contract in place, then they're allowed to change it. So then they say, yeah, I can break change because I just changed a number on the contract. So and say, yeah, but it's not just that, because if you have people consuming your products, if you just change, even if you change the major version, it won't work. You will still break everything on the way because you have a responsibility for maintaining stuff for some time if you have consumers and so on. So breaking change in a product are hard to manage. So that's if you don't have the process around to know how you're going to manage those changes and communicate them and so on, the technical contracts will never help you in a way. They're just a tool to achieve stuff, but you can still misuse them a lot.
I had seen horrible data contracts that are basically in Excel sheets that are not even technical, or in Notion. And I'm like, why? I mean, who is going to maintain this? Because no one wants to maintain this in the long term, right? Who is going to track the changes every time that happens and write it there? That's not happening. And for example, for us at that moment, to avoid these kind of changes upstream that will break everything downstream, we put the contracts, sure, with the microservice and the API and so on, but we also put with GitHub some kind of guardrail. So it was like, okay, every time there is a pull request, it will inform the data people, and until they approve the pull request, the changes won't be possible. So, it was really a strict way to do things, but usually most of the people are not following what they need to do, like talk. Basically, it's easy. Just talk to the people. Hey, we're going to make a change here just for you to be prepared. It's going to be in the next 2 sprints or so on. But this is not happening. But the fact that we were putting a pull request and then the approvers were the data team, that will generate at some point that the conversations started earlier, because they don't want their deployment to be stopped by the data people, right?
And yeah, I think what is interesting in all those things is yeah, how do you find the right level of automation or of technical processes to help doing those things, even if it's only a part of the whole, the contract's promise or all of that. So that's really important to think about how do we make it a live process, basically.
I like to compare it like when you are bowling with kids, right? That they have this
Yes,
lane
exactly.
so they can go there, but it goes back to the way. And at some point, when they are mature enough, you can remove all this and fully automate it because everybody is so in sync with the way that things work that it will basically run smoothly, right? But again, sometimes when you work with data teams or in general, software engineer or whatever, it feels like you're working in a kindergarten, especially my position or your position, where we are more like in the strategy part or the product management governance side of things, because you have to take care of all these little children.
That's a good one. That's a good one to give some lanes for people is a good example. Actually, I look at those lanes because again, in what we've done in New is that we've used different frameworks to guide users through value assessment, risk assessment, and so on. And again, they're both, you can look at it from a defensive side, how do we avoid this going to all direction? But actually, there's also a very good educational side of that because it's a way, again, that guiding things is a way to guide people through those questions and to make them very practical. So, to give a question step by step. So those lanes, I see those lanes as both guard rails, but also, I would say, it's like cycling. If you take the kid stack, it's like cycling in wheels. It helps you going through being autonomous there because you also educate at the same point. So that's, I think that's both. I like things that are both, how to say, you mentioned governance a lot, and the problem with governance in many cases is that it's only seen as a defensive process.
Yeah.
Like how do we avoid how it's very administrative and so on. And one of the big trick, which is easier said than done, but is to make it a value generation process or a value, and so how do we make those things appear not only as being defensive, but also about being value driven. I think that's if every time we can find ways to do that, then it's a big gain because then people don't only do it because they have to and they're forced to do it, but also because it's helping them, or it's helping getting so everyone understand that it's a better way. They gain time, or they get more alignment, or it will get whatever. So that's, I think it's very important to think about that.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree. Actually, when I implemented the whole data mesh and data governance in one company, of course, most of the people think that this is something that you implement from today to tomorrow, but it takes a lot of time and a lot of Game of Thrones, right, to go through. And the most successful team that we implemented this domain driven architecture, the data products, and the governance on top was a team when I spoke directly to the monetization team. They were having a lot of problems with data quality and so on. And I heard to their issues and I told them, okay, we can fix it, but we need your collaboration. So I need you to also give me, let's say, business test cases. So what ranges are the correct ones? What are you expecting from your data? More business driven also testing. And then they were very reluctant at the beginning, but then they started to see that they didn't have 10 metrics, but different numbers, meaning the same, right? Because we had to harmonize, we have to do a lot of things. And they were so happy that they were the ones owning the metrics, owning the data, and of course there was a technical person working behind that, but the business side of things, they felt very accountable because I was solving what they needed to be productive, right? Because if they provide bad numbers, of course the team looks bad, and for them the value was in having good quality to be able to provide better forecasting for do monetization in that company, which is really tricky, right? Of course I had to go through a lot of use cases until I found the right one, but that one enabled me to find other people coming to me, actually, the use cases coming to me, and then analyze which will bring value next. So people will come basically alone, as you said, with this process of not only imposing, but educating and also getting value out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's very good. I think that's yeah, as you really mentioned it well for me, is the fact that once you have a real business use case, it changes everything because you can stop
Mm.
talking only about dirty fact, just saying we need data quality and so on. You can align everyone, and then of course people want the end result, so they're very engaged in how you can solve that because then it makes sense. So I think that's really important. Yeah, yeah, great story.
Yeah, it was painful. But yeah, just for the people, I mean, this is not easy, as the use case is not going to appear right there and be easy for you to grab. It's a lot of work, actually.
Yeah, that, yeah,
Do you
it's
have a framework to choose the right use case?
yeah. I mean, we do, and again, the thing I mentioned it a bit, the fact that so we have frameworks. It's always something that has to be, I would say, tailored to each and every organization because depending on the maturity of the organization. So what we say usually is that the earliest you are, the simpler the framework should be, because initially you need to find, again, easy way to identify those quick wins or those things you need to start with to put things in motion. And then the more you grow, the more you can sophisticate that a bit because it's part of the education. And basically, you need those frameworks to ask questions about. One part is what is the value it's going to deliver. The other part is how costly or how complex it is to be. And sometimes we can add things like how ready are we? Ready in terms of technical readiness, so data availability, platform readiness, etc. But also in terms of organizational readiness. So are the business users ready to adopt that? Or is that driving a deep change? I think that's also an interesting question to ask yourself. Something if you want to change the way a team operates, that's tough. So it's not only about delivering a good AI to do that. You need to think about what are the changes you need to do around that to have that really adopted. Do we need to train people? Do we need different skills in the team? Do we need to restructure things? So do we need to change the tools they use to make sure that it's part of their workflows, etc.? So it's all about guiding those different dimensions, basically, in questionnaires. And then we provide different ways to visualize that, to have a visual way, to build a roadmap, to help. But yeah, basically, that's those questions. And again, it's not totally one size fits all because there is depending on the size of the organization, depending on the complexity of the organization, whether you're centralized, federated with different countries and so on. It can be different. And depending on your maturity. I always take the example that I know some people who start by doing the prioritization exercise purely on the whiteboard, with post-its, which is a good way to kickstart the conversation, but it's definitely not scalable. And on the opposite side, there is a very good, actually very good in some ways, Gartner framework, which has 120 qualification questions per use case. And of course, it's way too much for any organization. When I say it's good, it's because it's very comprehensive. So I usually encourage people who are Gartner clients when they want to use it, not to look at it to adopt it, but more as a way to be a bit exhaustive on the kind of question you might want to ask, and then pick and choose and adapt from that what would make sense for their organization and how they want to convey. So in that sense, it's good because it gives you, a very thorough work. But of course, there is some simplification work to do to make it tangible for a specific organization. And so yeah, that's kind of things we do.
Yeah, that's great because I totally believe in that you cannot provide just a blueprint or a framework for one organization.
Mm.
It needs to evolve with your organization as well, and also needs to be tailored for your organization as well, right? Because everything is different. And I hear a lot of people who is, "Hey, Amy, can you give me just the tips, or what would you do, or these with just a few words?" And I'm like, look, the thing is, like, there needs to be a lot of analysis, right, inside your company, what you're doing, what are your goals, right? Because if you don't understand the goals at the end, you can target the wrong use case, and also how to prioritize them. So
Yeah.
going to that, actually, I wanted to ask you, um, I talking about these organizations, right? That they have, I don't know, hundreds of use cases, a lot of noise around them. How do you approach doing this discovery and prioritizations on which data products to build first?
So there's different things. One thing we do, which is very important, is what we call the value mapping or the value lineage. is to make sure that we start by having a good understanding of what are the strategic business priorities, what are the business priorities from the stakeholders and so on, to make sure, because then we know and again, it really depends on the organization. Sometimes it's well defined, sometimes less well, sometimes they have OKRs or different KPIs that you want to track. So again, you mentioned it could be improving NPS, it could be improving margin, it could be improving employee well-being and employee turnover, it could be improving carbon footprint. Many different things are, expanding the business in new regions. So you need to find those business levers in business terms. So that's the starting point. Then from that, we can start to identify different use cases and link that to those different, let's say, business, expected business impact and so on. And in that context, then we apply those, qualification or prioritization questionnaire that we identified to give that more in-depth evaluation. So usually what happens is that it's always that kind of phase approach, where we can really understand, on one hand, what is really going to have the best impact on the business based on the strategic business priorities. And that's the first level of prioritization, what is really important for the business versus what's not. And then in that context, we can build some more detailed prioritization to identify, the right investments. And again, that's always a balance between that, but keeping it track and keeping in sight that link between expected outcomes and technology investments is a game changer on how you engage the business, you engage the executive committees, the board, and so on, to understand what's the data linear roadmap and where we're going.
Yeah, yeah. I totally agree on that. I mean, always business should be involved from day one to be able to build the right, to prioritize also, right? But to build the right product. Again, we go back to the beginning. We will create a lot of trash products that, not even products, but trash dashboards or data sets that no one will use. And that's
Yep.
expensive, right? Is hours of the people working on it, is resources from the cloud, and who else, what else you are going to need for that.
Yeah, exactly. And so so again, you have to engage business users. And I didn't mention that before, but the part of those questionnaires that we can deploy, or sometimes we call that canvases, because it's very similar to the product canvases that exist, or business model canvases, and etc. So that was that same thing about. And if you take any of the, for example, a business model canvas, and I know, we've been working together on the data product canvas, it's very clear. If you look at it, you ask a question about who are the users, what is the value, what is the requirements, what are the risks, and what is the ongoing requirements, to adoption and so on. So basically, I mean, I'm simplifying, but all those questions, and all those questions are both helping to define the product, but also helping with having all the material to prioritize. So what we do is, instead of having just those, let's say, visual canvases, to make sure that we make executable questions behind that, to not only have, and again, to phase that, because sometimes it's hard to consume. For me, those canvases are up front. So if you go through that road saying, hey, there is a new idea, do we want to invest more? Then we ask a new set of questions, and step by step, we go into better define priorities.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think guiding people through those canvases has also been very important, because we've seen that otherwise it can be hard to consume and hard to achieve the right level of, consistency in the definition. So that's why we basically explode the canvas into a guided process.
Yeah, yeah, and actually, you and me, we were working on these workshops. I mean, it's only for hours. This is not a 4 hours thing, so we have to really make it compressed. Um, but I use them a lot because, for example, I have on my website also like the set of templates for the people who want to buy it out of the box, like data product canvas, the business value proposition, right? And also, I don't know, templates for data contracts, right? Like what to put, what not to not put, or these kind of things. Of course, you start with the lowest one in the level, let's say, right? Like the business to get the value, and then with the value proposition, and then with the product canvas where you document all the technical kind of things. But then you can scale so much, as you said. That's why there is so many set of questions, so many different ways to do it. Even for us, when we wanted to keep these 4 hours workshop, what do we do to really make
streamline?
Because those questions get repeat a lot towards the phases, and it's just for you to really be sure, do you need it or not? Do you need it? Are you sure you need it? Is it?
Exactly. Yeah, that's and it can be a bit sorrow. So that's why again, I think all of those are great tools. And but you also always need to think into your organization how to tailor them to where people are. Because if you take the full canvas and try to run that with people with low maturity, they will drop the towel before getting anywhere. They will say,
Oh yeah.
you ask too much. I don't want to go there. So yeah, you need to prove your point before going too deep, basically.
Yeah, yeah, you're completely right. I would like to ask you, what are the common traps that the organizations fall that you have seen with your clients, right, into when they are starting this data product journey? Like, what are the traps you have seen the most?
I think speaking, the most common trap is always starting from the bottom up. And wherever we say, wherever people, best practices, and you see that with data products, but even more globally with data governance or data platforms and so on, is trying um, to skip that part of working with the business and try to go faster by skipping that discovery part and skipping that part where you really put time on defining where is the product, how people are going to use that, and so on, and starting to say, yeah, but we need to deliver something first. We know what people want, and we're going to build foundations. And I would say 99% of the case, that's what lead people to fail, because they spend time to build things that are a bit off and maybe over engineered, or and it's not that it's not well done, but it's missing the point, basically. Then when the pressure on value comes or on usage comes, they don't have any means to answer to that. Someone comes, what is the value, why is it used, and so on, and people forgot. So for me, that's probably the main cause of failure, is that going back to avoiding I had a discussion some time ago with people. You mentioned it before. There is a cost. People want to have the solution to a problem and want to avoid the cost of learning. You say they want just a solution, and in a way, you can't avoid the cost of learning. Never, no organization ever, no one. You can't avoid that. So if you want to do advanced mathematics, you will need to go through basic mathematics before. Whatever you want, you can read the
Yeah.
best book and say, let's skip the line. You won't, because you need the basics, and it's the same sometimes in terms of maturity. And so, yeah, you can't rush some of the things. And sometimes by wanting to move too fast, actually, you're just creating waste.
Yeah, I really like your analogy from the you cannot do advanced math, right? It's so on point. I always use the cheesy one, right? With the you cannot crawl, you need to crawl and walk and then run, because you cannot just do it. Because
Yeah.
usually, I mean, come on, I'm not gonna wake up tomorrow and say, hey, today I'm gonna run a half a marathon or something like that, or an ultra marathon, because I will die trying, probably. Maybe I will finish, but I will be cramped the next day, and probably
Yeah.
I won't be unusable for the next weeks. So, it's kind of the same thing. And I see that a lot. But what will be your advice for these people that start maybe when they're wrong foot and they started to run this marathon, to basically turn it around?
I think you can turn around anytime. And again, really accept that you need to go back. I would really go back to the basics of product management and saying, okay, now, we need to, again, maybe choose a few use cases, choose a few products, make sure that you rebuild those canvases after the fact, and recheck with users, with business users, that, yeah, you're on the right path, or maybe find some adjustments or some tuning, because that will be a very useful way to build that engagement, saying, guys, maybe we started wrong, but at least this is where we're going. We want your feedback. We want to make sure that we define, rebuild some of that. And of course, maybe they will agree a bit, completely or not at all, but at least it will be a very good way to do that, because most of the time it's not that all the foundations are wrong, because people, I mean, a lot of things are very common, but they're, as I said, over engineered or just a bit off, and so on. So I would really, for me, the priority is to go back on those, basics of, do we know why, and how do we work with users to prepare adoption, basically.
I totally agree on that. And I mean, we're running kind of out of time, but I would like your point of view. We can talk for hours about this.
Let's go. Let's do a marathon now.
But I see a lot of crossover between AI and data product thinking. How do you see the Gen AI changing the way we design and manage data products? I have my own thoughts in there, but I want to hear yours first.
Oh, that's, I think as in many ways, so you can look at two things, how you manage GenAI as a product, so that would be one. And the other one is how you use GenAI to help with product management and product management thinking. And I think like in many ways, GenAI is a great tool to accelerate stuff or to help. It's an assistant, to help you do
Mm.
things. So there's many things where you can help that to help you maybe identify product ideas or to help you refine things, change ideas, basically to accelerate some of those thinking and propose. So as always, not just asking a question to your favorite GenAI tool and getting the result directly, but because there's a lot of knowledge in those engines, you can use that. I think there is many ways here. One of the things we're working on, for example, is also to help capturing verbatims from business users to fill in canvases, and to help to facilitate those discussions and so on. So I believe there is many ways, many things coming with GenAI and LLMs and so on to help to help moving a step further with interacting with business users on how do we present what's going on the technical side and how do we capture those things. So I think there's some of the examples that where we can help with GenAI.
That's pretty cool because actually, not in data in general, even for a strategy, I use these, virtual assistants, and I record my meetings with some of the clients that are allow me to do this. And of course, I'm taking my notes, but sometimes I might miss something right during this conversation. Then when I come and compare, I'm able to already understand what are the requirements. So I make it much easier. What were the pain points? The way that I can get it from this assistant that I use is very nice because you have like 10, 20 different templates of what you want to get out of it. And it will really transcript plus get you the video. And then you can create more templates out of this conversation and try to get the points that you might miss. And that saves a lot of times and maybe 3 more calls, right? Because you are able to spot most of the stuff there. And then maybe already, okay, I want to deep dive in this. I will ask for another call. So I think this is going to help us a lot as an assistant to facilitate our job. The way, the second point that you also mentioned, how we are doing data products for AI. That's another thing because I feel we are just starting to get going with regular data products and putting AI on top without the right regulations that most of the companies are not really thinking about this. That's going to be tough. It's happening. I'm talking quite a lot lately about it because, of course, there is more AI and AI there. And actually, I will be with Alex Borek in the first week of June talking about these AI data products because it's a complex topic, right? Like, how do you have the data quality for these vector databases, for example? How do you make sure it's not hallucinating? When do you know what is 100% quality, what you need when you use a RAG or so on in the technical perspective, but also from a product manager perspective, then you need to understand these from the business, right? Like what's the accuracy level that you need?
Exactly.
And what are they are able to negotiate there in terms of quality, right? Because you can use maybe ChatGPT, but at some point when it hallucinates, or maybe it's not going to give you 100% accuracy and are some financial numbers, you cannot work on that. And this is a lot of confusion also about what is AI capable to do with just Gen AI versus Gen AI plus the other tools, and how do you incorporate this into data product whole view and product thinking? So that's a complicated one.
That's an extension, almost for me, an extension of the data product management because you have all the data product. So you have all the product preoccupation, all the data product preoccupation, then you add the AI specific things on top. But I think it's a natural continuum. And today we need to think into, for me, I like to think into data and AI products not to say, because in most of the case in organization, it's not just about delivering raw data as a product, but also insight or analytics and AI capabilities. So but again, you can't overlook those regulatory constraints, those quality constraints that are expressed in different ways. The fact that it's also, how to say, drifting, is also it changes a lot of things in the mindset, because the fact that, and it's the same with data, the fact that when you build a product, the fact that when a feature is done, it's done. with data, and especially with AI, when it's done, it can be not done tomorrow, for example. So you need to go even deeper on the automation and monitoring. So yeah, a lot of depth and question around that.
Yeah, and there is a lot of maintenance on these products specifically, right? Because there is the labeling or how the data sets for training changes or what regulations or so on, right? So it's a continuous loop there forever.
Totally. Yeah, that's why it's but again, it's for me it's the same with data, but even worse with AI. But because you have to changes, and if you don't account for them, it's what was working yesterday is going to be breaking tomorrow.
Yeah, but at least for a dashboard, right? The changes, let's say for a dashboard, is not going to be like every month, every 2 months, but the way that we are doing AI now, every day there's something different that you might need to take in consideration.
Exactly.
So. But yeah, and one more question for you before we're done here. If someone wants to start shifting toward data product mindset in their organization, what will be one small thing they could do this week to get the ball rolling?
This week, I would say read a product management book or join one of our workshops. I think it's I really think that's the main point. Starting with thinking about having that kind of how can we find one or two data products? How can we start to have that kind of discovery or definition phase and things? And that's the most practical things to do, is to really, if people don't understand what product management is, that would be starting with that. Otherwise, we can go. So depending where you start from, but either you need to start from that, or you can directly start digging into either key business problems or existing things where you want to, as you mentioned, kind of turn around and make sure that you're working on the right stuff, and maybe discover that you're not, or discover that you had good intuition.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. It's always a pleasure talking to you. We have so many stories.
Yeah, scary sometimes, scary with I would say scars, and but thank you for having me. And I think if anyone wants to continue the conversation, we can always reach me on LinkedIn or look at our website. I think just
you recently changed, right, from Yoi to Data Galaxy.
Exactly. So Yoi was acquired a few months ago now by a company called Data Galaxy, and we're really embedding our end-to-end value proposition around end-to-end governance, from the typical data governance to data and AI product governance, to helping with that strategic layer. And if you're interested in digging further, reach out to me or visit our datagalaxy.com website.
Yeah, I mean, it always is a pleasure talking to him. So follow him for sure. He's a great data product evangelist that you can find. Also, Laurent from Data Galaxy talking about the data governance kitchen. That's also a good one. So I always enjoy listening to them talking. Thank you again. You've been listening to Data Reality Check today, where data meets the real world. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll catch up next time with more real talk from data and AI. And remember, stay data driven, people. Thank you.
Thank you.